Call to order the Brushy Creek Regional Utility Authority Board of Directors meeting. Today is Wednesday, January 26, 2022. The time now is 6:04 p.m. We'll go ahead and start with our roll call.
President Thompson.
Present.
Vice President Duffy.
Here.
Secretary Flores.
Here.
Director Anderson.
Here.
And Director Kirkland.
Here.
And Matt Baker's out.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any citizen communication?
No, ma'am.
Okay, we'll move on to item 4, approval of the minutes. Consider approval of the BCRUA meeting minutes from December 15th, 2021. Do I have a motion?
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion carries. Item 5 is presentations. Consider a presentation regarding FY 2020 to 2021 BCRUA Financial Audit and action approving the same.
Thank you, Madam President. Today we have Rebecca Goldstein, the partner with Weaver, our financial auditor, to present our 2020-21 financial audit.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. I believe you all have a copy of the audit report here and then a copy of a 3 to 4 page letter dated January 10th. What I would propose to do is go over the required communications letter, so it'll tell you a little bit about the audit and our responsibilities versus the board responsibilities, and then I can go over any questions you have on the actual audit report itself. So if you look at the letter dated January 10th, addressed to the Board of Directors, Brushy Creek Regional Utility Authority. It basically just states that we did audit the financial statements for year ending September 30th, 2021. We did have a signed engagement letter with BCRUA dated August 6, 2021. And our responsibility was to express an opinion on the financial statements, whether they were fairly presented in all material respects. So basically what that means is we form and express an opinion under generally accepted auditing principles or accounting principles. There is a level of materiality, so we can't look at every single transaction, but we do look at all the material transactions. And our responsibility is to plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonable but not absolute assurance. It does talk about also in that second paragraph that we do consider internal controls in the audit, so we don't just take the numbers and audit them as they are. We do walkthroughs of processes and controls with management, so we do walkthroughs of your revenue processes, your expense processes, your fixed asset process, so we do all of that. We do consider internal control, and we do some testing at our discretion just to get comfortable with how transactions get into the general ledger. And so based on that, we determine how much substantive work we do on different sections. And so while we don't give an opinion on internal control, it is important to realize that if we did find a control gap or deficiencies, such as there was a lack of management oversight or reviews or reconciliations or authorizations or anything like that, that I would bring that to you all. We did not find anything like that. We also are responsible for communicating any other significant matters, of which we have none. The plan, scope, and timing of the audit, as seen on page 1 as well. We typically come in and do the audit right around Thanksgiving or week after Thanksgiving. And so the end of November, we work on the audit pretty much most of December on and off. And then as you can see, we issue our report at the beginning of January, so the respective cities can have the BCRUA audited numbers in their financial statements as well. We are also required to be independent of BCRUA, so you can see that on page 1. If you look at page 2, the top of page 2 talks about non-audit, non-attest services. Really what that is anything that we do outside of the core responsibilities for the financial statement audit. Really for BCRUA, that's putting together the report itself. So we take the audited numbers that management gives us and we help put together the footnotes and the actual statements. We do give a template to management for MD&A. So that's what the non-attest service is. And really anytime we do that, we do include in our management, or we include in our our engagement letter that says, if we're going to do that, then we have to have someone at the entity who's going to take responsibility for those non-attest services, who can obviously identify any errors or anything like that. So we didn't have any problems with those services. If you look under significant accounting policies, under qualitative aspects of the entity's significant accounting policies. It does state that the accounting policies are described in Note 2 to the financial statements. There were no initial application of accounting policies at BCRUA. There is a mention of a change in accounting practice in the supplemental notes in the back because there were some adjustments between the cities themselves that had a zero net effect on BCRUA. So you'll see that on the supplemental schedules, the individual city schedules, and the supplemental notes in the back. But overall, there was no new accounting pronouncements or policies implemented for BCRUA. Under significant accounting estimates, we're always required to tell you all if there's any estimates in your financial statements. There's always some level of estimation. Really for BCRUA, because you're heavy fixed assets, we do like to remind you all that, you know, depreciation is an estimate. It's based on a useful life of a fixed asset. So you have a fixed asset that goes into operation and you estimate the useful life of that asset, and based on that, that's how you depreciate it. So we look at obviously the historical aspects that go into that estimate of useful life. We make sure it's reasonable. We look at similar fixed assets, if you will. So nothing unusual there that went into that estimate. We also like to say that there are revenue true-ups in the financial statements as well, and so the revenue, the contributions for the cities are based on estimated expenditures. So there are, those are estimates made throughout the year, and then there's true-ups at the end. Again, we didn't find any problems or any inconsistencies in those estimates. If you look at page 3 of the letter, we talk about financial statement disclosures. Nothing significant there. We do just point you to the cash and cash equivalents footnote, long-term debt, and economic dependency, which basically states that BCRUA is dependent on the 3 partnering cities. There were no significant difficulties encountered during the audit. Under uncorrected and corrected misstatements, the takeaway there is basically there were no misstatements that were material that we had to correct. There always are some small adjustments here or there, so there were adjustments, but none of them were material. And there was nothing that we found that didn't get booked. So that's a good takeaway from that. There were no disagreements with management. In terms of representations requested from management, we do require management to sign what we call a management representation letter. That basically just states that they've given us everything that we've requested, that we haven't been misled, that no documents were falsified, that they take ownership of the financial statements. So that's pretty much due diligence and required for every audit. So we did have that. There were no other management consultations with other accountants. And on the last page, there were no other significant matters or findings. Under modification of the auditor's report, we do have an emphasis of matter paragraph in the opinion itself, and that basically just refers to the note that says BCRUA is dependent on the 3 sister cities to continue operations. And so that's what that is. Okay, so that's all my required communications. I know you all have the audit in front of you. I'll just touch on some of the areas. The main takeaway, it was a clean audit. I felt like it went really well this year. We have our main contact, Dan Wire and his team. But of course, the financial statements and the numbers go through all of the city's reviews, particularly their individual statements, and the putting together of the financial statements and the MD&A. So we do get feedback from all 3 cities. If you look at the beginning of the financial section, our independent auditor's report is on page 1 and 2, or page 1 through 3. Again, the only thing I would point out there is an emphasis of matter paragraph that speaks to note 6 of the dependency on the cities. And does talk about required supplementary information, which is the MD&A. So we don't actually express an opinion on the MD&A. But again, we do read it. We make sure that all of the information in there is factual based on the audit. And I will point out that the MD&A, I feel like, is a good story, right? Because the financial statements are just the numbers, but the MD&A is really where the management gets to come in and say, hey, here's all of the phases of what we're building. Here's what happened this year, if we had any new bonds. So it really does tell the story. It also can compare prior year to current year, which you don't get in a single year financial statements. So the required supplementary information is that MD&A. And then other information, it just refers to the supplemental schedules in the back, which is the individual schedules by city, which again, we don't audit at the city level, but obviously we make sure that those schedules roll up into the BCRUA statements themselves. And then the cities themselves make sure that those numbers are factually correct for their books and records. Okay. And then I will point you to, after the first opinion, you have the MD&A, then you have the financial statements themselves, and then the footnotes that start on page 16. There is also a government accounting a government accounting opinion in the back as well. That is on page 30 to 31. So you can see there's another independent auditor's report on governmental accounting standards. That's actually required for every governmental entity. That just means that we have to dig a little bit deeper because you are a government entity. So like I said, not just auditing the numbers, but actually going in and looking at the processes and controls. We look at any regulations, anything like that that would have a material effect on the financial statement. So if there was any compliance issues there, again, we would let you all know. There were no issues there as well. That is all of my required communication. If anybody has any questions on the audit process itself or the statements, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the summary and the clarifications. Does anybody have any additional follow-up? Okay, all right.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I make a motion to approve those, the financial audit.
Second.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, the motion carries. Item 6, Resolution 6A, consider a resolution authorizing the president to execute supplemental agreement number 17 with Walker Partners for Phase 2 land rights and stakeholder coordination project.
Thank you, Madam President. You do have the item 6A packet in your materials in front of you. And this is related to the land rights for Phase 2 construction that BCRUA has been working on probably since the maybe 2015 timeframe. So the land rights for the 240 properties that are involved in this has been one of the most complex parts of this project. BCRUA had originally budgeted $5.75 million for land rights, including $2 million for land costs. The costs itself were about $1.5 million for the electrical part and about $500,000 for water land. And the board initially authorized $2 million for Walker Partners for the land rights activities related to acquiring the easements and other land-related activities. And we had budgeted $1.2 million for later activities, including the temporary power project and some of the other things that hadn't been initially scoped with that first Walker Partners authorization in 2017. Over time, we needed an additional about $700,000 due to the condition of Nelson Electric Co-op's easements that needed to be improved, the North Rim evaluation, increased number of condemnations, et cetera. I'm going to invite Josh Knutson up to the podium. He's a vice president at Cobb Finley, who is handling the land rights, and they've been doing a great job for us. And as we're nearing completion, additional funds are needed to bring us to closure. The number of condemnation hearings have increased, almost tripled. The number of appraisals have doubled. This proposal that you have in front of you is for an additional $304,292. It's still within the initial land budget that we had laid out, and Josh is going to provide some more information and help answer any questions.
Sure. Thanks for having me, by the way. Sorry. Good to meet y'all. So I think for us, the two main issues that have led to the need for the additional fee was, first off, we'd only budgeted 20 appraisals in the initial contract that we had, and we've to date done 33. So we've exceeded our number of appraisals. We've also had expert witness prep and testimony time. When we go to these condemnation hearings, the appraisers have to appear and testify, and so there's an additional cost there as well. So that's part of it, the sub fees that we've incurred, but then also the increased number of condemnations. So we had initially budgeted for 8. to date, we've had 12, and we anticipate 11 more. So we'll have a total of 23 there. So we believe that this fee will provide for us to complete the project and handle all of the condemnations.
And some of the increase in condemnations were related to the North Rim properties and probably a lot of the landowners getting engaged through the Property Owners Association and the lawyers that were representing some of the landowners have now amassed more of the properties to be involved, and that's causing a lot more condemnation issues.
Can you speak a little to what has caused the jump in appraisals compared to what was originally thought we would need?
Right. So when we budgeted initially, we were hoping that we could do broker opinion of values on each of those and then get the owners to accept, and we've met more opposition than originally anticipated. And so in order to send a final offer and go to condemnation, you have to have an appraisal report. So we've had to engage more of those than we initially anticipated.
Thank you.
I guess as we move further, we're bidding against ourselves as we set the price
Right.
for the individual pieces, and then the next ones are the same or higher?
I mean, it depends. You know, each property is unique. Yeah, there may be some, increase in cost due to some of your other acquisitions, but, a lot of that is more just the time, the market adjustments over time, the increases there, and just, landowners that are getting more and more savvy, more and more attorneys that they're engaging and getting them to help them. I would say that's a bigger factor than, going against yourself.
And then I guess, if I heard you correctly, we're almost halfway there, approximately halfway?
I think we're further than that. I don't have the specific numbers in front of me, but yeah, we're pretty well along.
Thank you.
Will this increase account for finishing up this process? Have we adjusted completely for what we think?
Yes,
Okay.
we believe this will finish this out.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion?
I have one question. It's it's on the second page of our packet, and I'm just more curious than anything. In the paragraph right below the bullets, it says it talks about the amounts billed will be based on cumulative hours, and then you get down here to amounts payable to the engineer for reimbursable internal expenses and the engineer's consultant expenses will be subject to a 5% overhead factor. So I guess I'm just wondering if that's our policy as BCRA we pay 5% on expenses, because as an engineer, I've never gotten 5% markup on expenses. So I'm just curious I've never noticed that before in previous contracts. It's probably always been there.
Well, the 2017 contract is what laid all that out, and while I wasn't here, that is embedded in that agreement, so it's
Okay, I mean,
negotiable.
The sub-consultant
Going
markup is typical. I've just never seen a markup on expenses. Okay, that was the only question I had.
All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, the motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Item 6B, consider a resolution authorizing the president to execute an agreement with Walker Partners for BCRUA underwater pipeline replacement project.
Thank you, Madam President. In December, our engineer, Aaron Archer, presented the results of his analysis of repair options for our 36-inch underwater raw water pipeline that failed in December 2020. The operating committee reviewed the alternatives and agreed with Walker Partners' recommendation of a partial replacement of about 1,500 feet of pipeline using a high-density polyethylene pipe material. Walker Partners has prepared a proposal for the design, and the operating committee has negotiated with Walker Partners and reached consensus on the agreement that you have in front of you. The design fee for the pipeline design, agency and stakeholder coordination, land acquisition, and special services, including some hydraulic transient analysis, is $277,645. which is about 9.25% of the estimated construction costs of $3 million. I'm going to turn it over to Aaron Archer to present additional information and answer any questions that you all have.
Thank you, Karen. One thing I wanted to point out that you can see in that scope of services that we had talked about last time, we do have some effort in there, again, with Josh and the Cobb Finley team to go back on a few of the pipeline easements that were originally acquired in Phase 1A to expand those rights to place another pipeline within the easement. The original easement was for a single pipeline, and so that is the purpose of the land acquisition line item in our scope. It impacts 4 easements. One of those easements is LCRA.
So we're having to modify the easements to allow for a second pipe, is that right?
That's correct.
So, like with regard, I mean, I guess that's because we never thought we'd have another pipe going next to it, I guess, right?
Yeah, it would be fairly standard practice when you go get a pipeline easement to obtain it for a single pipeline versus pipelines plural. In most cases, if you left it at pipelines plural, you would pay for the right to place additional pipelines within that easement. At the time of this acquisition, the lake was very low, and there's actually multiple projects going on in that cove of Lake Travis to place underwater pipelines. And it was a fairly significant concern with property owners that additional cities would come in and continue to place pipelines, chasing water to a deeper location in the lake. And so there was no opportunity to obtain an easement for pipelines without paying a lot of additional cost for a right that we really didn't want to exercise because this is a temporary pipeline that goes away when Phase 2 comes online. So we certainly didn't contemplate having to parallel it.
Anything that we can do for future easement requests that perhaps gives us some leeway to do that without having to pay for it on the front side?
Not really. If you want to put additional pipelines, you'll pay for it on the front side.
All right, thanks.
For the Phase 2 project, fortunately, we're talking about our pipeline easements are for deep subsurface tunnels. So those are being constructed one time.
Do we need to ask for 2 tunnels?
I wouldn't recommend it.
And then on
Good
the
questions.
electrical easements, that we talked about in the last item, those are pretty much prescribed by Purness Electric.
Those are following PEC standards, which is typical practice for them not to put parallel distribution lines in the same easement, just for the risk of a car or something coming off the road and taking out multiple circuits at one time. And so those will be conveyed to PEC, or they are being conveyed to PEC as we complete them.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, related to my last comment.
Yeah.
If you look at time and materials section on page 3, payment of monies due for direct cost expenditures shall be based on the actual costs, which is what I would expect. So I would just, going forward, suggest that we as BCRA should not be paying a 5% markup or any other markup on expenses for any consultant.
Thank you for that observation. We'll make note of that.
Let me also add that while this is under $500,000, which is normally the level cutter for you all bringing it to your individual councils for approval, because this project was not in the budget, we certainly hadn't planned for it when we prepared our budget, then our attorneys are recommending that each city take this to the city council for approval. So we'll get that prepared going for you all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, I'll make a motion to approve the resolution.
Second.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Now we are to closing comments. Vice President Ann Duffy.
Well, I appreciate all the work as always, and thanks, everyone.
All right, Secretary Flores.
Good night.
Citizen Director Anderson.
And just thank you to all the city staff that work so hard from BCRUA.
And Citizen Director Kirkland.
Thank you for all the work everybody's done. Thank you for everybody on this board that participates and everything, and good evening.
All right. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for all your work on this. Have a good night. We are adjourned.